Okay, let's see. Brian, you want to pray us in?
Sure. I just stuck 3 peanuts in my mouth, but
Okay.
Lord, I just want to thank you for this group of saints, this church, and I just pray for wisdom to be released tonight, maybe some aha moments, something that'll we can use and we can remember and apply to our lives. And I just thank you for Janine and Ray. They're hosting this thing, and just I really, that's one of the things that I look forward to every week. I just know your Holy Spirit's going to be with us, and he's going to be with us, even things we don't even hear on the, you know, on the Zoom meeting. We'll hear from him. And I just pray that that's what it's going to be like tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brian.
Okay. So we are on our third week of study. She gives me chills all the time. I just love it. So last week we talked, oh good, Pam's coming on too. Last week we talked about, hey Pammy. All right, so we did the law of the Levirate last week. Does everybody remember that?
Yep.
Yeah. So that was that whole creepy scenario where Naomi was suggesting that the girls wait around for her to get pregnant, and then they could maybe wait and have a husband that comes up as a result of that. So we did the funny chart and we looked at that, but we also saw that in Ruth, this wasn't the only time when that law or that tradition was used. We saw in Genesis chapter 36, Judah and Tamar,
Right.
and they had Perez and Hezron through this same process. We saw the law that was set up. If a man dies and his wife is childless, then his brother shall go in and perform the duty of the Levirate. And then we also saw in the Gospels, a whole bunch of Sadducees came to Jesus and said, okay, here's a hypothetical situation. There was a guy who married a girl, he died childless, and then each of the 7 brothers married her. Whose wife is she going to be? And Jesus was like, you're missing the point. But the whole point that we were making was seeing that that law is something that comes up throughout Scripture, that it wasn't just here. So we had kind of fun looking at that because it explains that weird part that Naomi was suggesting. And then we also looked a little bit at the word hesed last week, and it's translated kindness most of the time. That we looked at the word kindness in Hebrew is hesed, and it basically means the relationship that exists between two people in covenant. That's what it is. When you're in covenant, you have a relationship with that person that's different than any other relationship. And there's strong bonds that are in that relationship. We're going to look at some more of that tonight because it's going to pop up again. So as we're getting ready for this, we also want to keep in mind who our original audience is. Remember, we always want to know that it can't mean anything to me, that it didn't mean to the original audience. That means we had to figure out who the author is. Most likely it's
Ezra.
Ezra is most likely, which means that this book was written 400 to 550 years after it happened.
Okay.
So this story and this account was given to Ezra, had to have been through Revelation because, it was so many years after. But when we're thinking about Ezra and his original audience, so if Ezra's sitting there writing this, the people that he's writing it to, if you remember, the tribes of Judah and Benjamin had been carried off into captivity by the Babylonians. They were carried away from the Holy Lands. They were carried away from the land of the covenant. And the reason they were carried away was because of their disobedience. There were several things we could talk about that their disobedience was evident in. But remember, if you're in an if-then covenant, bad things are going to happen. And that's what they were. So there was a few things specifically that they'd done wrong, but basically the point is that they'd been carried off into Babylonian captivity, and they spent 70 years there, 70 years there. So that means that when it was time to turn around and come back to the land of promise, as God wanted him to, think about being someplace 70 years. I mean, you haven't even been in your house 70 years. None of us are alive 70 years.
Right.
Right.
So that means our parents had been carried off into Babylonian captivity. We've spent our entire 58 years in there. And then Ezra comes and says, hey, do you want to go back to the homeland? And I'm like, I thought I was in the homeland. This is where I've been my whole life. So there was a group who chose to stay in the Babylonian captivity era. And just for your notes, that's the book of Esther, the people who chose to stay. But there were some that chose to go back. And when among those that chose to go back were some really, really old ones that were older than 70, super old,
Like Jeff.
Phil.
some old ones. And there were some like us who'd been born in captivity and some younger, lots younger than us. And so there was this mixed group that went back. There were three different loads that went back. The first one, you don't need to know this, but the first one was led by a guy named Zerubbabel. The second load was led by Ezra.
Okay.
So Zerubbabel had taken the first group of exiles back, and his job was to lay the foundation of the temple and get some houses built because the land had been vacant for 70 years. Remember, the temple had been smushed too as part of the takeover. And then when Ezra went back for the second load, his job was to take barrels and barrels and barrels and barrels of gold.
Of what?
All gold.
Gold.
For the adornment of the temple. So now the temple had been rebuilt, but now it needed all the gold overlays. It needed the gold furniture. It needed the gold dishes and bowls and candles and all that kind of stuff. So he took a group back. And when he got back, it was told to him that the people of the land have not separated themselves from the women of the land. They're beginning to intermarry. And you guys, they'd only been back 50, 60 years by the time Ezra took that second group back. And here already, the first load that had come back was intermarrying. And in Ezra chapter 9, it says that he sat down. Ray, what was the word? Appalled. He sat down appalled. And just he couldn't believe it. You mean after all this time, you're going to repeat the same sins that your parents did that got you in this mess in the first place? Have you learned nothing? Do you not know about the covenant with God? Do you not understand that God's loving kindness is on you, especially here in this land, in this place? And as part of his educating the people of the land, this group that he brought and the previous group that came, there was one other group that came later. This is how the story of Ruth came up. He's educating them on what Hesed is and what the relationship is between the people of Israel and God because they're in covenant. He's educating them on the if-then nature of the first covenant. And he's doing it by I'm going to use the word telling the story, but that makes it sound like it's fiction. It's not. I just mean he's telling the story.
Yeah, the account.
Okay. Does everybody understand that?
Yeah.
Okay. And he's using Ruth as an example of what to do. He's using Ruth as an example of someone who's coming into covenant relationship, which is what she was doing when she left her father's family and she came with Naomi back to Israel. Remember, she said, your people are going to be my people. Your God is my God. Where you die, I die. But even though she came back, there was this whole atmosphere of covenant going on around her that she didn't know anything about. She didn't know how it worked. She didn't know the traditions. She didn't know easy things like we have a kinsman redeemer. And she's like, great, what's that? We're going to get into that tonight. But there's all this stuff going on that she didn't know. And that's exactly what was going on for Ezra's audience. They had come back. And because they were in the land and because they were God's people, there's all this covenant stuff. Like it's like the air they breathe. But they didn't recognize it. They didn't understand how integral the covenant was to the land, like Ruth didn't understand how integral the covenant was to everything going on around her. So her job was to figure it out. Naomi's job was to teach her. With Ezra's audience, his job was to teach them. Their job was to figure it out. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we've got all this cool stuff going on, and that it's our job then to figure out, we're in Ruth's place. We're in the exiles returning place. We don't get it. We don't understand all that cool old covenant stuff that's going on. So it's our job to dig into it and find out, what the heck is the law of a brother-in-law, the law of the Levirate that we saw last week? What is Naomi talking about? And so we spent last week looking at that in particular. So tonight we've got some more fun that's going to be just like that I want to talk about starting in chapter 2. But first, I just want to run over a couple things, kind of loose ends. There's not really a flow to this part of the teaching because it's just loose ends of stuff that was in chapter 1. So one of the first things that we saw about Ruth was that she was a Moabite. Everybody saw that?
Yes.
She's a Moabite. That means that she's from the nation of Moab. She is a descendant of Moab from a long time ago, and that the Moabites aren't really God's favorites. So all I did, you guys, was look at the Strongs and find out where the word Moab shows up and then learn stuff. So you guys can do that too, right?
Yeah.
So let's go to Genesis chapter 19. Oops. For our first introduction. In fact, the birth of Moab is what this is. Genesis chapter 19. So chapter 19 is Sodom and Gomorrah. That's what Genesis 19 is. So you guys know the Sodom and Gomorrah story. Got to get out of town. I can't go so far because I'm old, so go halfway up a hill and you'll be safe, but don't turn around and look back. And then you remember Lot's wife turned around and looked back, and she met her demise. So is everybody familiar with that? Yes?
Yes.
Around, I'm
Absolutely.
pretty sure everybody is. Yep. So then what happened was, after they'd done, so that left Lot and his 2 girls, because Mrs. Lot was dead. Nobody else wanted to come with him and be delivered. So Lot and his 2 girls go halfway up the mountain to escape the fire that was coming down on Sodom and Gomorrah. So when we get to, what did I say, 39? Let's go to like 30. Go to verse 30. Chapter 19, verse 30. Lot went up from Zoar. Are you there? Sorry, I
Yes.
should ask first before I got going. Lot went up from Zoar and stayed in the mountains, and his 2 daughters with him, for he was afraid to stay in Zoar, so he stayed in the cave, he and his 2 daughters. Then the firstborn daughter, this is all Ewe, said to the younger, "Our father is old, and there is not a man on earth." I think that's hilarious. That shows how wrapped up they were in Sodom and Gomorrah, that once Sodom and Gomorrah is dead, there's not a man on the earth.
Not a decent man.
So there's not a man on the earth to come into us after the manner of the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine. Let us lie with him, that we may preserve our family through our father. Okay, everybody shudder. We'll just get it out.
Ooh.
Yeah, we'll just get it out of our system. All right. Verse 33, so they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in and lay with her father, and he did not know when she lay down or when she arose. On the following day, the firstborn said to the younger, "Behold, I did my duty last night. Now you go in tonight, that we may preserve our family through our father." Verse 35. So they made their father drink wine that night also, and the younger daughter arose and lay with him, and he didn't know when she lay down or when she arose. 36. Thus both the daughters of Lot were with child by their father. Verse 37, the firstborn bore a son and called his name Moab.
Okay.
There we are. Ruth is the descendant of Lot and firstborn daughter. Does anybody need another shudder? One more time? Yeah. However many you need, you are free to take. But so the firstborn bore a son, called his name Moab. He is the father of the Moabites to this day. As for the younger daughter, she also bore a son and called his name Ammon, really, Ben-Ammi. He's the father of the sons of Ammon to this day. So that's interesting for you to note as you read through the Old Testament. Any Moabites or Ammonites? There
Yeah.
goes the shudder.
Yes, shudder. Yeah.
Yeah, those are the ones. So we've got Ruth being a Moabitess, but there's more. She's a descendant of Moab. She's a descendant of Lot, who's a descendant or a close relative to Abraham. Remember that Lot was Abraham's nephew. But there's more to the Moabite story than just this. The rest of the story has fewer shudders in it, but there's more to the story than just this little part. So let's look at the next part. And let's see, let's go to Numbers, the book of Numbers, chapter 22. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, chapter 22. So in the book of Numbers, the children of Israel are on the 40-year timeout. So remember that they were going from Egypt into the promised land. That should have taken a couple of weeks. God purposely extended it to take a year. But then because of their disobedience, they lost their timeout. And so it's 40 years of wandering. So that's what's happening in Numbers chapter 22. They're walking around the mountain, waiting for grandma to die. And while they're waiting, they have a few adventures, and this is one of them. So Numbers chapter 22, verse 1. The sons of Israel journeyed and camped in the plains of Moab beyond the Jordan opposite Jericho. Now Balak, who was the king of Moab, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. So Moab was in great fear because of the people, for they were numerous, and Moab was in dread of the sons of Israel. So Moab teamed up with Midianites, and they said, this horde of Israelites is going to look up everything that's around us as the ox looks up the grass in the field. And Balak, the son of Zippor, was king of Moab at this time. So I'm not going to read the whole rest of it, but I'll tell you the story. So they hired a prophet named Balaam. And the Moabites hired this prophet, and they said, we want you to go up on a hill and look down at the Israelites and prophesy against them. Send a curse on them. And so Balaam was like, okay, cool, paid job, I'll do it. So he went up to the mountain and looked down on the Israelites and opened his mouth to curse them, and blessings came out instead. He blessed Israel. And he was like, darn, I hate when that happens. And so when he reported back to the king of Moab, the king said, did you curse him? And he goes, no, I tried, but blessings came out. So this happened 2 more times. 3 times Balak tried to curse Israel, but blessings came out of his mouth instead. Well, of course, this makes God unhappy with the Moabites. Another reason to be unhappy with them is that he tried to curse Israel. Okay, so that's part of the story. It's still not the whole story. So we've got this incestuous start, and then we've got their desire to curse Israel instead of bless them. Go to the book of Judges. Oh, wait a minute. No, let's go to Numbers chapter 25. Let's do this one. Numbers chapter 25. We're still wandering. Numbers chapter 25, verse 1. While Israel remained at Shittim, the people began to play the harlot with the daughters of Moab. For they invited the people to sacrifices of their gods, and the people, the Israeli people, ate and bowed down to the Moabite gods. So Israel joined themselves to Baal of Peor, and the Lord was angry against Israel. Then the Lord said to Moses, take all the leaders of the people and execute them in broad daylight before the Lord, so that the fierce anger of the Lord may turn away from Israel. So they did. And down in verse 9, it says there was 24,000 people who died because they started worshiping the gods of Moab. So not a good history. Not good relations between Israel and Moab. There's even more. Let's go to Judges chapter 3. So Judges is closer to the time that Ruth was happening. Judges chapter 3. Remember that she's happening in the Judges period.
Can I ask a question?
Heck yeah.
Moses, those 24,000 that were killed were Israelites?
Yep. who had worshipped a Moabite god. Mhm.
And about how long were they in the wandering in God camp? About how long from the exile of Egypt did this happen? Um,
Well, I don't know off the top of my head. I'm trying to do math here. And
like
math is hard.
halfway through, or
Can I look it up and tell you next week?
yeah. I was just wondering. They knew that they were wandering for a long time at this point.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought it was kind of toward the end because they're right at the cuff of the Jordan already. And
Yeah,
I
but they passed it a couple times in the
okay, yeah,
cycles. Okay, how far into the wandering did the
And this would have been the 24,000, probably mostly the ones that weren't going into the promised land anyway.
Yeah.
Not the children that have been already born.
Yeah, most likely, yes. But
Okay.
I'll find all that out for you. Okay. Where are we going?
Judges 3.
Judges 3. Judges chapter 3, verse 12. Now remember the judges, well, really on any of this, it's an if-then covenant. Even in the book of Numbers, it was an if-then covenant. So if you do good, good things happen. If you do bad, bad things happen. We're not under that covenant, but they were. And so that's what we expect to see happen. So really, every time we see God say 24,000 have to die, what's our response, even though it's hard?
he's
Yeah.
faithful.
God is faithful. God keeps covenant.
Keeps coming. Yes.
Yep. All right, so here we are in the book of Judges. Remember, we've got this cycle, Judges 3:12. Now the sons of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord. So the Lord strengthened, remember, he raises up plunderers. The Lord strengthened Eglon, the king of Moab, against Israel because they had done evil in the sight of the Lord. And Eglon gathered to himself the sons of Ammon. Oh, wait a minute, what? Does the sons of Ammon mean anything to you?
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
lots.
The other brother.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, so these guys are distant cousins, Moabites and Ammonites. Okay, so he gathered to himself the sons of Ammon and Amalek. Oh boy, don't get me started on Amalek. I can't do it tonight. But anyway, and he went and defeated Israel, and they possessed the city of the palm trees. The sons of Israel served Eglon, the king of Moab, for 18 years. This is during the Judges period. He was one of the plunderers. Verse 15, but when the sons of Israel cried to the Lord, now it means we're down at the 6 o'clock slot. They cry out and they repent to the Lord. So when they cried, does everybody know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So when the sons of Israel cried out to the Lord raised up a deliverer for them. That's over at 9 o'clock. Yay, a superhero is coming. Ehud is the deliverer, the son of Gera, the Benjamite, a left-handed man.
Mhm.
And the sons of Israel sent tribute by him to Eglon, the king of Moab. Ehud made himself a sword which had 2 edges, a cubit in length, and he bound it to his right thigh under his cloak. He presented the tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. Now, Eglon was a very fat man. It came about when he had finished presenting the tribute that he sent away the people who had carried the tribute, but he himself turned back from the idols which are at Gilgal and said, I have a secret message for you, O king. And he said, keep silence. And all who attended him left. And Ehud came to him while he was sitting alone in his cool roof chamber. And Ehud said, I have a message from God for you. And he arose from his seat. And Ehud stretched out his left hand, which was his dominant one, took the sword from his right thigh, and thrust it into Eglon's fat belly. The handle also went in after the blade, and the fat closed over the blade. Yeah, Pam's going, oh, gross. There's our another shudder thing for ooh. The fat closed in over his belly, and it did not come out. Then Ehud, our judge, went out into the vestibule and shut the doors of the roof chamber behind him and locked them. When he'd gone out, The servants came and looked, and behold, the doors of the roof chamber were locked, and they said, "Oh, he's in there pooping."
Yep.
And so they waited. They waited for him to poop. And they kept waiting and waiting until they became anxious. But behold, he did not open the doors of the roof chamber. Therefore, they took the key and opened them, and behold, there their master had fallen on the floor dead. So that's Moabites. We keep seeing these Moabite stories, and none of them are in any way favorable. Look at Judges chapter 11, verse 18. Since we're still in Judges, remember, we're still in the Judges period and that funny cycle. Funny, I don't mean haha, I mean ironic, basically. Judges chapter 11, verse 18. This is Joshua talking, I think. Hang on. Let's go back up to, no, let's do that. Here's what they did in 18. They went through the wilderness. Israel went through the wilderness and around the land of Edom and around the land of Moab and came to the east side of the land of Moab. And they camped beyond the Arnon, but they did not enter the territory of Moab, for Arnon was the border of Moab. And Israel sent messengers to Sihon, king of the Amorites, king of Heshbon, and Israel said to him, "Please let us pass through your land to our place." But Sihon did not trust Israel to pass through his territory, so Sihon gathered all his people and camped in Jahaz and fought with Israel. And then go down to 25. Now, are you any better than Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab? Did he ever strive with Israel, or did he ever fight against them? And he did. That's what Joshua is saying through this whole thing. So we see that there's this history with Moabites, that there was early history with Moabites, and here Ruth is coming in, just born a Moabite. She didn't know it was a big deal. She didn't know it was anything. She didn't know that there was any reason for her to be not liked by Israel, which is this whole other layer onto the story, that not only is she coming in, but she's in danger as she's coming in. We're going to see that in chapter 2, that it would be understandable for her to have been attacked or ridiculed, or at the very least, gone without any help. So that's kind of what I wanted us to see about the Moabites. There's one more that's pretty important. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 23. So we're going backwards in time. Deuteronomy is the retelling of the law for the second generation that was going to be wandering. Deuteronomy chapter 23. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Here we go. Helps if you sing the song in your head.
What song?
The song.
Oh,
The
the
books-
Bible.
The books of the Old Testament song. All right, so Deuteronomy chapter 23, starting in verse 3. No Ammonite or Moabite shall enter the assembly of the Lord. None of their descendants, even to the 10th generation, shall ever enter the assembly of the Lord. Why? Because they did not meet you with food and water on the way when you came up out of Egypt. We just read that in Judges, that they didn't help. That Israel had to go around the land of Moab. They wouldn't allow them to go through. Verse 4, because they did not meet you with food and water on the way when you came out of Egypt, and because they hired against you Balaam, the son of Beor from Pethor of Mesopotamia, to curse you. I told you that story already, right?
Yeah.
So, verse 5, nevertheless, the Lord your God was not willing to listen to Balaam, but the Lord your God turned the curse into a blessing for you, because the Lord your God loves you. You shall never seek their peace or their prosperity all your days. So there's this Moabite thing that poor old Ruth is coming into this, and even as she's coming into the covenant, she's also coming into this prejudice that she might not even know was there. It would have been a lot easier if she had gone with Orpah back to her dad's house, but we don't even know why, except that she understood the Hesed part. She understood dealing kindly with Naomi and with her dead husband. So she came with them. So does that help? Kind of think about what's the deal with the Moabites? Because we're going to see in chapter 2 that they took measures, extraordinary measures to prevent her from being harmed. And that's why they had to take extraordinary measures, is because she's a Moabite. Okay. You ready for chapter 2, Steph?
Yeah.
All right, so starting in chapter 2, well, actually, we got to finish on chapter 1. So let's go to 1. Verse 22, the last verse of chapter 1. It says, now Naomi returned, which means she went back to Judah, went back to the area of Bethlehem, and with her, Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, who returned from the land of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. So whenever there's a time phrase like this in the Bible, at the beginning of the barley harvest, there's for some reason that Ezra wants us to know that, or unless he's not the author wants us to know that. He wants us to know that she came back to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. So I've always put a little clock sign when there's a time reference like that. So on this one, I did beginning, on the word beginning, at the beginning of the barley harvest. So barley harvest begins on the day of Passover. So it's spring. This year it's next month. I looked it up. I think it's April 14th. So you guys remember that Passover is the celebration of the night that Israel came out of Egypt. That's how Passover started. And so here we are. She comes back at the beginning of spring, basically. And so the barley's being harvested as she comes back. So let's flip over to page 2, Ruth chapter 2 then. Verse 1, we're going to come back to. It's kind of a general overarching statement about a relative. We're going to come back to that in just a minute, but let's start at verse 2. They came back to town at the beginning of the barley harvest, and then Ruth said to Naomi, please let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain. If you want to, you can write barley above that. If you need a reminder that the grain she's harvesting is barley grain, after one in whose sight I may find favor. And Naomi said to her, go, my daughter. So Ruth departed and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come to the portion of the barley field belonging to Boaz, who was the family of Elimelech. Okay, so first off, we have to talk about this whole thing about her going into somebody else's field and taking food, which now you can't do. You can't go harvest somebody else's corn and take it home and eat it.
Right.
They'd call the cops, you'd be in major trouble. So that causes us to go, okay, wait a minute, what's going on here? What's happening? So there's a few different words starting in verse 2 that we can look at. She's going to go glean. She departed and she went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And then if you go down to verse 7, she'd asked the guy in charge of the farm, please let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves. So what's going on here is that there's a difference between gleaning and harvesting. So in the Old Testament, a harvest was brought in by gleaners. A gleaner was somebody that the farmer hired to go out and bring in his crop. So I'm going to pay you $5 an hour. You're going to go out and harvest all my corn. When you come in, I keep the corn. You get the $5 for every hour you worked, and we've got a happy exchange. That's how the farmer gets his crop out of the field. What Ruth is doing is not harvesting or not reaping, but she's gleaning. And that's different. That's something that's different. So it's in the Strong's or in the Hebrew. Hang on, we're gonna write it down. It's the number is 3951. I didn't write down the Hebrew word because I'm not good at Hebrew. I'm a Greek girl, so I didn't write it down. But anyway, it's 3951. And what it means is to do a thing a second time. So the reapers went through and they harvested. They got all the barley they could carry, and they put it in their bag, and they're going to take it back and give it to the farmer. In this case, it's Boaz who owns the field. What the gleaner does is go behind them and pick up anything they dropped, because anything they dropped is fair game. If they left a sheaf, if they tied the barley together and they're going to come back later and pick up the sheaves, kind of like hay bales for us today. If they dropped one of those or missed it, that's free for the picking up. In fact, let's see, let's go to a couple scriptures. Let's go to Leviticus chapter 19 to explain this. Remember that Leviticus is an explanation of the law. Leviticus chapter 19. And I have a picture for you of this also. Leviticus chapter 19, starting in verse 9. So it says, now, are you there?
Yeah.
Now, when you reap, so that means you're paying somebody to go out and get your harvest and bring it in, right? Now, when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap to the very corners of your field, nor shall you gather the gleanings of your harvest. So there's two things there. The first thing is that the way they were to, so this is an overview of a section of land. In Nebraska, it's a mile wide by mile long, and that's called a section. So they planted in rows, just like we do. Okay, they planted in rows. But the word in Leviticus says that they're not to reap to the corners. So that means they leave the corner. So they're reaping in a circle. And that means the stuff in the corners that was planted in rows is left for the poor. This is the welfare system.
Okay.
So when she says, can I go glean? She's meaning the corners. Can I go to the corners and get this stuff? Which is acceptable. The harvesters harvest in a circle. The gleaners go off into the corners to see the pink parts.
Yeah.
And they go get them. So that's what she's asking to do. She's asking, can I go glean? And then she comes in this field and she gleans. I've got more scriptures. Hang on. This is just the picture. So Leviticus, we didn't finish this one. Leviticus 19, starting in 9. Now, when you reap the harvest of the land, you shall not reap to the very corners of your field, nor shall you gather the gleanings. Now, remember that word gleaning means to do something a second time. So that means that the harvesters need to be very thorough when they go through the field, picking all the barley, because they cannot turn around and pick one up that they left accidentally. If they go through and miss one, the farmer's out of luck. It cannot be picked up.
So this is kind of attributed to tithing.
It's more attributed to welfare than to tithing, because people will keep reading. Okay, so starting in 9 again. Now when you reap the harvest of the land, you shall not reap to the very corners of your field, nor shall you gather the gleanings, the ones you left behind, of your harvest. Nor shall you glean your vineyard, which means the same thing. You can only go through your vineyard one time. So it's the farm crop you can only go through one time, and now we find out your vineyard. You can only go, don't drop a grape because you can't pick it up. Once it's dropped, it's gone for the farmer. Now look at this, 10. Nor shall you glean your vineyard, nor shall you gather the fallen fruit of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the needy, for the stranger. I am the Lord your God. Okay, that's why I say it's for welfare. God planned this ahead of time to have provision for, in this case, it says for the strangers and for the needy. Yeah?
Yeah.
They had to work for their welfare. Ray just said they worked. They did. Ruth had to go out into the field and work all day.
Yeah,
Right.
to
right.
get her welfare. Okay, let's look also, since we're in Leviticus, go to chapter 23, verse 22. 23, verse 22 of Leviticus. Okay, says it again, but now we've got a little bit of expansion here. When you reap the harvest of your land, moreover, you shall not reap to the very corners of your field, nor gather the gleaning of your harvest. You are to leave them for the needy and the alien. I am the Lord your God. The alien means foreigner. Did Ruth qualify?
Yes.
Absolutely.
For both of them.
Both
She was
count.
needy and she was a foreigner. So this was there for her. Leave them for the needy and for the foreigner. There's more. Let's go back to Deuteronomy, verse 20, chapter 24. Deuteronomy chapter 24. Starting in 19. Deuteronomy 24:19. Here we go again. When you reap the harvest of your field and have forgotten a sheaf in the field, you shall not go back and get it. It shall be for the alien, for the orphan, and for the widow, in order that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. When you beat your olive tree, you shall not go over the boughs again. So now we've got the field, the barley field, we've got the vineyard, and now we find out it's also pertains to the olive trees. When you beat your olive tree, you shall not go over the boughs again. That shall be for the alien, for the orphan, and for the widow. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, you shall not go over it again. It shall be for the alien, for the orphan, for the widow. You will remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore, I'm commanding you to do this thing. So, when Ruth says, can I go glean in a field? She's not asking you to go steal a farmer's harvest. She's asking, shall I go avail myself of this welfare provision that's in your land? So she's entitled to the corners. Down to the corners. And to anything that the gleaners, sorry, I've got funny light here. The reapers, she's entitled to anything that the reapers drop and to anything in the corners. That's what she can go get. What's Boaz do?
He leaves it on
Yeah.
purpose.
Yeah.
He's a,
Tells
right-
them to leave. Yeah.
he's a righteous man.
Yep. Hang on here, Ray, can you scoot this way? Yes.
Okay, close the line.
Yeah, close the blinds. That had to work too.
I can do that too.
Because I'm like
So-
closing the blinds. There we go. There we go. Nice Nebraska sunset. Okay, so let's go back to Ruth chapter 2. Let's see what old Boaz does. So, okay, so she went to glean in the field. Verse 3. Did you put some sparkles around the term? She just happened to come to the field of Boaz. Did you put some sparkles around that?
Ta-da.
Just happened.
Just happened to wander into Boaz's field. So she just happened to come to the portion of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. So then Boaz comes back and he goes, who's that cutie out there in the field? I don't know if he said cutie, but who's that lady out in the field? And they said, well, that's the Moabite that came back with Naomi. And right away, Boaz knows who she is. This is Hesed. This is the atmosphere of covenant that's going on all around Ruth that she doesn't even know about. She just happened to come into Boaz. But as soon as he heard that she was Ruth the Moabitess that came back with Naomi, he knows who she is. And he knows who he is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
He knows there's a relationship there. He knows there's Hesed there. Even though she doesn't know it.
Right.
And so what happens is that she begins to benefit from the Hesed that she doesn't even know is there. She begins to benefit from that. So Boaz says, all right, so here's what I want you to do. Boaz said to Ruth, verse 8, listen carefully, my daughter. Put a circle or something around daughter. We're going to come back to that in a chapter or two. Basically, the implication seems to be that she's younger than he is. Okay, so anyway, we'll come back to that. Boaz said, listen carefully, my daughter, do not glean in another field. Furthermore, don't go on from this one, but stay here with my maids. Now, his maids aren't gleaning. His maids are reaping.
Oh,
And now we know the difference.
yeah.
Okay, I want you to stay with my maids. Let your eyes be on the field which they reap and go after them. Indeed, I have commanded the servants not to touch you. Did anybody look it up?
The word touch.
Yeah, the word touch.
Mm.
What's she in danger of? Did anybody look it up?
She's got the history behind her where they should be mad at the Moabites.
Yep. So the word touch is 5060. Remember, we're in the Old Testament, so it's Hebrew. It's 5060. And it means to strike, to molest, or to beat.
Does that have anything to do with Deuteronomy 23:3, where it says no Moabite will enter the assembly of the Lord?
Yeah.
Oh.
So think about it. If Boaz had to say, I don't want anybody to hit her or to molest her, we know that she was in danger of being hit or molested, right?
Yeah.
So I have ordered my servants not to hit you. When you are thirsty, go to the water jars and drink from what the servants draw. That water is provided to the paid employees, not to the gleaners usually. So she gets to act like a paid employee. She's going to be close to the servants. And then she said, she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, why have I found favor in your sight that you should take notice of me since I'm a foreigner? And he says, here's the answer. All that you have done for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband has been fully reported to me. And how you left your father and mother, and you left the land of your birth, and came to a people that you previously did not know. May the Lord reward your work, and may your wages be full from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to seek refuge. Then she said, if I have found favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have come. Then she said, I have found favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me, and indeed have spoken kindly to your maidservant, though I'm not like your maidservants. And then in verse 14, at mealtime, he said, come here that you may eat the bread and dip your piece of bread into the vinegar. So she sat beside the reapers, not by the gleaners. She's sitting with the reapers, and he served her roasted grain. And she ate and was satisfied and had some left. And then 15, when she rose to glean, Boaz commanded the servants, saying, let her glean even among the sheaves. Remember we read, if you drop a sheaf, it's there. And then he says, and also you shall purposely pull out some of your grain from the bundles and leave it that she may glean, and do not rebuke her. So first he said he'd commanded no one to touch her. We saw that meant hit or molest. Verse 15, he says no one's supposed to insult you, which basically means insult. The number is 3637. Insult, shame, humiliate, or to wound figuratively. So they're not even supposed to make fun of her. They can't hit her. They can't make fun of her. And then in 16, it says, do not rebuke her. That number is 1605. And it means to chide or reproof. So basically, she's completely untouchable. And Boaz makes that happen. Because without his making that happen, she was completely vulnerable.
Yeah.
Right.
So he changed her position from one of 100% vulnerability to 100% protected.
And had he not been a man of God, he could have just looked at her and saw a Moabite.
Right. Yep. Yep. So she gleaned until evening, and then she beat it out and brought it home. She got about an ephah of barley, which is a bushel. In 17, she brings home a bushel of barley. Think fall apples, Applejack orchard. You come home with a bushel of apples, so it's about that size. She brings home this much. So what I wanted to do then was to look at what happens next. So she brings home this bushel back to Naomi. And I just think it's amazing. Her mother, so let's try to be there in our imagination, but look at verse 19. Naomi then said to her, when she got home, Naomi says to her, "Where'd you glean today and where'd you work? May he who took notice of you be blessed." So Ruth told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked. And she said, "The name of the man with whom I worked today is Boaz." But she probably said it like, the name of the guy I worked, I think his name was Boaz. It was Boaz. Yeah, I worked at Boaz's field. She didn't know that it was a big deal. And then if we just read this boring like, if we just keep on going down here, and Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "May he be blessed to the Lord, who has not withdrawn his kindness to the living and the dead." And again, Naomi said, "This man is our relative. He's one of our closest relatives." That's a very boring reading because that's not what Naomi said. Ruth says the name Boaz, and Naomi inhales all the oxygen in the room.
Yeah.
She was like, and Naomi is like freaking out, jumping around the room, getting all excited. And Ruth's going, "What on earth just happened to this Boaz? He was a nice guy, but I don't know if he's worth all that," because there's covenant that Ruth didn't know anything about. Boaz's name has an implication to Naomi that Ruth didn't know about. When Naomi gets excited about this, it's for a reason. And she tells her that. And it's just this coolest picture in our mind to see cranky old Naomi get all excited and say, "He's..."
Right?
Can you see it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dancing around the kitchen.
Yes. We're eating Boaz's barley. Are you kidding? It's this big deal. So we then need to look at what these words mean. We have to find out what about it, because we don't know either. We're used to reading that verse boring. Have you not heard a pastor read that verse boring, or some Bible study leader say, "Oh, blessed be him whose field you worked"? Yeah, he's one of our relatives. Yeah. You've heard it read boring like that?
Yeah.
Because we don't get it either.
Right.
So we need to get it. Do you want to get it?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. So we got to use our strongs and look up these words and find out what it is that Naomi's saying. So I worked in the field of a man named Boaz. Verse 20, Naomi said to her daughter-in-law in a very high-pitched squeal, "May he be blessed of the Lord, who has not withdrawn his kindness." Just so you know, that word kindness right there is said. It's the relationship that exists in covenant. God has not withdrawn his hesed to the living, us, and to the dead, which would be Elimelech, Mahlon, and Chilion in this case. And again, when Naomi caught her breath, she said to her, "This man is our relative." We're going to look that word up. He's one of our closest relatives. We're going to look that word up. Because they're two different words. They're the same word in English, darn it. But in Hebrew, they're two different words and they have two different meanings. And this is where the story happens. This is where we find out what is the big deal. So, Naomi said to her, "Oh, wait, so he is our relative." So let's look that one up first. That one is 7138. I think it's pronounced Karovi, and it means near. That's what it means. It's near in place or in kindred or in time. So it's just that he's our relative. That's what it means. He's related to us. So that's not the big deal word, because we already got that. He's a relative. But when it says he's one of our closest relatives, that's the one that makes it go, oh, there's something more to this. He's not just related to us. There's something else. So that word for closest relatives, the number is 1350. And the Hebrew word is Gaal, Gaal. Gaal. And it means redeemer, kinsman redeemer, or avenger. He is our redeemer, our kinsman redeemer, or avenger. And this word is super, super important because, like Hesed, a Gaal only exists in covenant. You don't have a Gaal unless you're in covenant someplace. And if you're in covenant someplace, you have a Gaal. This kinsman redeemer holds a special role in any covenant that's in the Old Testament. There's this person, and we saw it a little bit when we looked at the law of the Levirate last week, that we saw that after married Tamar, remember that? And then he died and left her childless. Then the next one to go was Onan. Onan would be her redeemer, her Gaal. The Levirate is one of the roles that the Gaal plays is law of the Levirate. So then Onan was her redeemer. And then after that, Sheila was going to be her redeemer. So there's this certain thing. It's not supposed to be Judah right away. It wouldn't be a further off relative. We saw last week that the law of the Levirate has a process, that it goes from the oldest down to the youngest, that he doesn't have to do it if he doesn't want to, but if he doesn't want to, he's going to get spit on his face and lose his shoe. And so we saw all that procedure that went into it. But this Gaal, this idea of Gaal, is more than just the Levirate. There's other things involved in it too. So do you want to find out what it is?
Yes.
Yes.
That make Naomi squeal in the kitchen? It's so cool. All right, so
So Janine, can I ask you one question here? It's Kat.
Yep.
Would this not be for Naomi instead of Ruth? Because it's Naomi's relative, not Ruth.
So it's Naomi's, Ruth's relative, not a blood relative for her. But remember that the whole process starts if a man has a wife and he dies and she's childless, then she's in line. She's owed by someone who's actually not her blood relative, but her husband's blood relative. And so that's why we're looking at this way. And it is going to end up being Naomi's redeemer as well. But specifically, what's making Naomi excited is that he's going to show his redemption through Ruth.
Yeah, but she doesn't know that, right? It should be Ruth. It should be Naomi.
No, Naomi didn't die childless. She had Mahlon and Chilion.
Oh, okay.
Yep. What do we got, Tanya? It's a picture of Ruth and Naomi and the barley.
Those felt stick-up pictures. That we
Yeah. It's a flannel board.
Yeah.
Remember that? Yeah. Tanya's sharing the picture.
Okay.
Naomi's excited.
Yep, Naomi's excited. And that's actually, it looks to me like that's the sheet, not the bushel, but and that comes up a little bit later, but both of them are excited. Yeah. Okay, so let's look at
I
this.
think that's Lewis sharing the picture because it's certainly not me, and I think Lewis has my name on him too.
Oh, because
So
it says
Lewis, you
Tanya.
can take it down now.
My name is on there too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. So what we've got going here, we want to find out about this word, closest relative. So let's look at a few places where Gaal shows up. There's three really big deal things. Just like there's this relationship that exists in covenant, there's the Gaal that exists in covenant. So basically, we're going to see that there's three jobs of a Gaal, three jobs of the kinsman redeemer. The law of the Leverites just part of it, but there's three other bigger jobs. And I'm hoping to be able to get through all this tonight. I think I can. So starting, you guys can start to turn to Leviticus chapter 25. But I need to back up in my storytelling a little bit and remind you that when God put the children of Israel into the land of Israel, there were some rules about it, about their being there. And one of the rules is that every seventh year was a year of rest. So you're not supposed to plant your crops. You're not supposed to do anything. It's a year of Sabbath to the Lord. And then God requested that they count off 7 Sabbaths, which would be 49 years. And then on the 50th year, it's called the year of Jubilee. You guys have heard of that?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's some cool things that happen on the year of Jubilee. One is God's provision is there for 3 whole years. It's really cool. But on the year of Jubilee, if in the intervening time, say Dawn sold her property to Linda, in the year of Jubilee, Dawn gets her property back.
Okay.
And in the year of Jubilee, everything restores. Everything goes back to the way it's supposed to. Remember that when the children of Israel first entered the land, Joshua split up the land according to tribes. Yep, everybody remember that?
Yep.
So if for some reason a piece of land was sold outside the tribe or outside the territory, the tribe's territory, God didn't want that. He wanted all the borders to remain the same. So he made a provision that if they sold a piece of land on the 50th year, it goes back to its original tribe. Because of that, if Dawn's going to buy some of Linda's land, as they're discussing price, they take into consideration how many years are left on the land. If we're only 3 years away from the year of Jubilee, the land's going to go for cheap because Dawn's only going to keep it for 3 years. Basically, all she's buying, I mean, if you look at it practically, she's buying the right to farm the land. She's not actually buying the land.
Leasing it.
Right?
Yeah.
What, Jeff?
Yeah, they're leasing it, really.
Yeah, leasing it, really. Yep. So if they want to buy the land and there's 47 years left before the year of Jubilee, the cost will go up higher, right? Because she's got a lot of time to use the land. So God keeps this in mind because he's very concerned about where the land is and who owns it. So I just had to remind you about the year of Jubilee. Those you can find in Leviticus 25:8, Leviticus 25:10, and Leviticus 25:15, which basically says every transaction has to keep the year of Jubilee in mind. So with that in mind, look at Leviticus 25:23. Oops. Leviticus 25, starting in verse 23. This is hugely important, and it's important even for today, for what's going on in the Middle East right now. But Leviticus chapter 25, verse 23 says, "The land, moreover, shall not be sold permanently." Why? For the land is mine. The land belongs to God. So you can't sell it permanently. You can't pretend to sell it permanently. You can't think you're selling it permanently. The land belongs to God. But you are aliens and strangers with me. Oh, sorry. Aliens and sojourners with me. Verse 24 says, okay, so thus, for every piece of your property, you are to provide the redemption of the land. So that means he wants you to have money in reserve to get the land back if ever it needs to be come back.
Okay.
It's like, I think, Jeff, we would call it an escrow account, maybe.
But
Yeah.
so when they get the land back, they have to also, in the transaction, pay a portion, if not all, what was given to them in the middle of the lease.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
That he wants somebody to have money on hand to get that land back. So for instance, if Brian has to sell land, I'm concerned about it, so I'm gonna put money in a savings account because I'm Brian's brother. And if he gets in trouble and he can't pay for that land or can't get it back for some reason, I'm gonna go get it and pay for it.
Totally an escrow account. Wow. Real estate 101 and Leviticus 25.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Jeff,
So
Jeff, can you be my kinsman redeemer for me?
Yeah.
So verse 25, if a fellow countryman of yours becomes so poor that he has to sell his property, then his nearest kinsman, guess what that word is?
Redeemer.
Yep, that's Gaal. That's this word we're looking at. One of the jobs of the Redeemer is to keep the land in the family. Keep the land in the family. So the first job of the kinsman redeemer or the Gaal is to keep the land in the family. Verse 25, if a fellow countryman of yours becomes so poor he has to sell part of his property, then his kinsman redeemer is to come buy back what his relative has sold. Or in the case the man doesn't have a kinsman, but so recovers his means to find sufficient, he gets to do it. Then he's going to calculate the year since its sale and refund the balance to him who sold the property. And then it goes back. It's going to revert in the year of Jubilee anyway. So this idea of redeeming the land is the first thing that the kinsman redeemer has this job of. His job is to keep the land in the family. Look at verse 24. I think we just read it. Yep. For every the Gaal or the kinsman redeemer is to come buy it back. It's not sold permanently. He's going to keep the land in the family by having enough money on hand to go buy back the land. Now, it seems to me like it'd be easier just to go ask the Gaal for a loan. I don't know why they go through the process of selling a property and then the Gaal goes and buys it back. But that's what it is. That's what they say to do. So the first job, keep the land in the family. Second job, keep the people in the family. Leviticus chapter 25, verse 47. Now, if the means of a stranger or sojourner with you become sufficient, and a countryman, meaning a Jewish person, of yours becomes so poor with regard to him as to sell himself to a stranger who is sojourning with you or to the descendants of the stranger's family, then he shall have redemption right after he's been sold. So, meaning he's poor, and so he sells himself as a slave. One of his brothers can redeem him. That word redeem is this word of buy back. His brothers can redeem him. His uncle can redeem him. Or his uncle's son, meaning his cousin, can redeem him. Or one of his blood relatives from his family must redeem him. Or if he prospers, he can redeem himself. And again, he needs to calculate how many years from 50 to get it back. So the Gaal's job is to keep the people in the family. Don't let them be sold out of Israel to a stranger or a sojourner. The Gaal needs to have provision, needs to have money in the bank that he can use to go buy back one of the family members.
If he has to.
If he has to. Yep. And look at 55, Leviticus chapter 25, go down to 55. Why should that happen? For the sons of Israel are my servants. They are my servants whom I brought out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So the land belongs to God. You can't sell it permanently. It needs to be redeemed. The people belong to God. You can't sell them permanently. They need to be redeemed. And the one who redeems is the Gaal. So we're finding out that this Gaal needs to have means to do it. And he's got to be related to the person that this is happening. The Gaal's job is not just to redeem anybody. The Gaal has a specific family that he's responsible for. The people that are in his covenant, not just everybody. Right? So this is all family stuff. Okay, so there's a third job. that the Gaal is responsible for. The first one is a little louder.
Keep the land in the family,
Yep, and
then
Keep the people.
keep the people.
keep the people in the family. And then the final and the third job that the Gaal has is to act as a blood avenger. Ooh, that sounds weird. His job is to act as a blood avenger. So you can turn to Numbers chapter 35 if you want. Numbers chapter 35, we're going to start in verse 9.
35.
Numbers chapter 35, starting in verse 9. Okay, so I want to define a few terms for you before we get in here. A murderer is someone who kills on purpose. Okay, a manslayer, according to Numbers chapter 35, is someone who kills accidentally. I threw a rock. I wasn't aiming for anybody in particular, but it hit them on the head and they died. Oh, I feel so bad about it. A murderer, the word says that they lay in the ditch waiting for somebody to come by. They throw the rock and hit them. So they do it on purpose. Do you see the difference?
Yes.
Okay, so that's what this chapter is about. How do we handle a murderer? How do we handle a manslayer? Okay. Yep. So Numbers 35, starting in 9, the Lord spoke to Moses saying, speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, when you cross the Jordan into the Canaan land, then you shall select for yourselves cities to be your cities of refuge, that the manslayer who has killed any person unintentionally may flee there. The cities shall be to you as a refuge from the avenger. The word avenger is Gaal. The number is 1350. This is the same. This is the kinsman redeemer. This is the closest relative. This is Boaz. This is the third job that the Gaal has. Sometimes I just think it's unfortunate the way the English translation is. Because all before they called him Redeemer and now they call him Avenger. And how are we supposed to know that's the same guy?
Right.
Thank you, God, for a Strong's Concordance, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Janine, what was that verse? Numbers?
We are in verse 12 of Numbers 35.
Thank you.
Yep. So the cities shall be to you as a refuge from the avenger. Now here's so that the manslayer will not die until he stands before the congregation of Israel. I'm going to keep reading and you'll get it as we go. I know it's still cloudy. The cities which you are to give shall be 6 cities of refuge. They're going to be spread across verse 14 and 15. We don't need to know where they are. We just need to know they are there. Again, at the end of 15, anyone who kills a person unintentionally may flee there. So these cities of refuge are a safe space. They're base. I killed somebody accidentally. I feel bad about it, but I can't go home. I need to go to one of these 6 cities. Otherwise, I'm going to die. There's a price on my head, even though I killed on accident. But I need to get to one of these 6 cities of refuge just as quickly as I can. And then starting in verse 16, it explains the difference between a murderer and a manslayer. If he struck him down with an iron object so that he died, he's a murderer. And the murderer shall surely be put to death. If he struck him down with a stone, by which he will die, and he did die, he's a murderer. And the murderer shall surely be put to death. Or if he struck him with something wood, he shall surely be put to death. So there's these 3 ways. If they killed on purpose, look at verse 19. The blood avenger himself, that's Gaal, shall put the murderer to death. Keep the land in the family, keep the people in the family, and kill a murderer. The blood avenger shall put him to death. He shall put him to death when he finds him. That's why if I killed on accident, well, let's keep going. The blood avenger shall put him to death when he meets him. Now, this isn't any murderer. This is somebody who murdered somebody in my family. The blood avenger's family. Okay.
Oh.
I should put him to death when he meets him. Now, verse 20, if if he pushed him out of hatred or threw something at him, lying in wait, and as a result he died, or if he struck him down with his hand in enmity, and as a result he died, the one who struck him shall surely be put to death. He is a murderer. The Gaal shall put the murderer to death when he finds him. That's Boaz's job. Naomi's all excited. He's our Gaal. I'm so excited. He's our Gaal. Well, his job, if he's Gaal, is to keep the land in the family, keep the people in the family, and to act as blood avenger. Kill somebody who kills somebody in our family. Verse 22, but if he pushed him suddenly without enmity, or threw something at him without lying in wait, or did it with any deadly object of stone without seeing it dropped on him so that he died while he was not his enemy or not seeking his injury, then the congregation shall judge between the slayer, that's the one who killed on accident, the congregation shall judge between the slayer and the Gaal, according to these ordinances. So if they murdered somebody and the Gaal find him, he kills him. It's done. There's no trial. But if there's a manslayer, if he killed on accident, the blood avenger still is after him because you killed somebody in my family, but there's going to be a trial. The congregation shall deliver the manslayer from the hand of the Gaal, and the congregation shall restore him to the city of refuge to which he fled. And he shall live in that city, even if it's not his. He's got to go live there until the death of the high priest. But get this, if the manslayer at any time sticks his toe outside the city of refuge, the blood avenger will find him and get him.
Wow.
Verse 27, when the blood avenger kills the manslayer, the blood avenger will not be guilty of blood, because the slayer should have remained in his city in refuge where he was supposed to be. Okay. So again, we miss out on this because I'm not bad mouthing the translators. They did the very best they could. They probably thought this was completely different, but it helps us to see that Gaal and blood avenger are the same thing.
Yes.
They're the same person functioning in three different roles. The first role is keep the land in the family. The second role is keep the people in the family. Third role is act as blood avenger. Okay. Yay for Strongs. We love Strongs. Hang on, where's my next note sheet?
Oh,
It's
God.
interesting because they are saying that the LSB is like supposed to be like the truest translation. And we're finding issues with it right here.
The ESV?
LSB, which is the new 95. It's 95 with the 77 combined.
Okay. Yeah, no translation's perfect at all. And we're totally fine with that. We totally get that. That's why we have tools like the Strongs. Strongs doesn't tell us what to think. It just shows us what the words are. And then we can use the word of God to go in further looking up those words. So that's all I did was I just looked up Gaal everywhere and found out these jobs. Right? Anybody can do that. Anybody can do that. It's easy. It's a little bit more work, but it's not difficult or anything. So God's good. So, all right. So now we've got these three jobs. So let's look then. Oh, I thought I had it. Yeah, I did. So not only are there three jobs for the Gaal or for the blood avenger. Do you see Boaz in this? Not so much yet. Kind of maybe. We don't see any blood avenger type stuff, but there's three qualifications of a Gaal then. So just because Lewis is a Gaal in his family doesn't mean it's got anything to do with Don at all. It doesn't. There's no crossover. It's not like Lewis is appointed the Gaal for America and that's his job. It's for his family only. He's got no polar authority in anybody else's family. This is all a family issue. So there are three qualifications to find out who if you're Ruth and Naomi, who your kinsman redeemer is. He's specific to us. There's three things that make him specific to us. First, he's got to be a blood relative. We saw that it could be that a brother redeems, an uncle redeems, a cousin redeems. It has to be a blood relative. chapter 2 of Ruth begins with, now there was a man, now Naomi had a kinsman of her husband, a man of great wealth, of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. So Boaz was a blood relative. He was of the family of Elimelech. And so he meets that qualification. Look at what she says. We already read this in 2:20 when she's squealing. He is our Redeemer. He's our Gaal. She knew it. Now look at this. This is cool too. In 2:20, he is one of our Gaals. So we find out there's more than one. Just like we saw in Deuteronomy, Leviticus, the land can be redeemed by a brother, by an uncle, by a cousin. All of those would be considered a Gaal. In the case of the law of the Levirate, in Genesis chapter 38, after died, Tamar's left without a husband. She has two Gaals, Onan and Shelah. Remember?
Yeah.
And then she even makes use of the fact that Judah is a blood relative. And that's how she ends up getting her baby. So there is more than one. We saw in the book of Mark when those Sadducees came and were trying to talk to Jesus about a man died, left no children. So his brother married her, then his other brother, and there were 7 brothers. Those all 7 were Gaals. They all could fulfill the role of kinsman redeemer. So that's what Naomi says about Boaz. He is one of our kinsman redeemers. So that means they have more than one blood relative. Look at chapter 3, verse 12. We're going to get in this a little bit more later. But Ruth comes to him and says, you're one of my Gaals, right? Naomi told me that you're a Gaal, a kinsman redeemer. And in verse 12, Boaz says, it is true that I am up. So she had 2 who were blood relatives that could have filled the role. Look at 4, I think that's a 3, chapter 4, verse 3. Oh, now in chapter 4, Boaz is talking to that closer relative. Remember, he says, I am a Gaal, but there is one closer. So in chapter 4, verse 3, Boaz is talking to that other closer relative. Verse 3 says, then Boaz said to the closer relative, Naomi, who has come back from the land of Moab, has to sell a piece of land which belonged to our brother Elimelech, to our brother Elimelech. So now we see that there is land involved in this. There's land and people involved in this story. Naomi has to sell a piece of land. Can you redeem it? Remember, if they have to sell a piece of land, then somebody needs to put that money in escrow to buy it back. Yeah, do you see it?
Yeah.
He didn't go ask everybody in town because not everybody in town's a Gaal. It has to be Boaz or this other guy.
Yeah.
Who were related. Both of those guys were related to Elimelech. So it's got to be a blood relative. You guys good with that?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just had a quick question.
Okay.
Because when I read this, I kind of just thought Boaz just kind of took over that spot because the guy didn't want to, and they went to the elders and he with witnesses and all that stuff. But now this other guy, he's not really off the hook for being a kinsman redeemer anymore either, is he? Because other people could get in trouble. I mean, he bought Naomi's land and redeemed it and all that stuff, and he got Ruth with it. But this other guy, another situation like along where somebody needs to be redeemed or something happened, he's still he hasn't lost his position, only that part of it, that piece of land and that person. And you know what I'm saying? Like,
I think, yeah,
it's not like
hypothetically,
Boaz is now the only guy from
Right.
that point on.
I don't think it is. We don't have any record of there being any other relatives. So the likelihood that somebody else would need to sell some land that Elimelech owned, I don't know, but yeah, you're right. Just because he chose not to do it this time doesn't mean he doesn't have to do it next time.
Yeah, okay.
But that, Brian, that leads us into the next qualification of a Gaal. The first one is he has to be a blood relative, and the second one is he has to be willing to do it. He's got to be willing to do it. Look at chapter 3, verse 13. We're just going to run around Ruth for a little bit. I realize we're a little bit over. But again, I'm looking at you, and nobody drove to get here tonight. So we'll
Right.
just use that
We're
drive time. When you're all at the living room, I'm kind of like, oh, I better get them home. It's going to snow.
Just for me, we're supposed to get 2 to 4 inches, and I gotta
Yeah.
get up at 4 in the morning.
Okay.
Because I got
Well,
I
I'll
gotta
get
be
you
in the
out
work
quick.
at 4:30.
I'll get you out, Bill.
All
All right,
right.
so 3:13, chapter 3, verse 13. Boaz is talking. He says to Ruth, we're going to get into this more, but I just want to show you the willing part. Remain this tonight, and when morning comes, look at this. If he, the closer relative, will redeem you, then good. Let him redeem you. But if he does not wish to redeem you, then I will. Do you see all the choice that's in this?
Yeah.
Mhm.
The closer relative can choose to redeem you. If great, you're redeemed. That's awesome. But if he does not choose, then I choose. So the kinsman redeemer has to be willing to do it. Just like in the law of the Levirate, Onan didn't have to redeem Tamar, but he had to go through the procedure. And that's because he didn't. God wasn't mad at him because he chose not to redeem. He didn't have to. God was mad at him because he didn't go through the procedure. So he gets to choose to do this. Look at 4:4. This is when Boaz brings it to the closer relative and says, do you want to? So I thought in verse 4 of chapter 4, Boaz is talking and he says, so I thought to inform you, closer relative, saying, buy it before those who are sitting here and before the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, then redeem it. But if not, tell me that I may know. For there is no one to redeem it, and no one but you to redeem it, and I am after you. And then the closer relative says, I will. I want to. I will. I will redeem it. And then Boaz says, cool. On the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you must also acquire Ruth, the widow of the deceased, in order to raise up the name of the deceased on his inheritance. And then the closest relative says, no, I don't want it. I don't want it. Choice. You see the choice.
I wonder why he didn't
Jeffy.
want it then.
We'll get there.
Oh,
Yep. We're going to get there. Okay. So he's not willing. So he didn't have to, but Boaz was willing. He says, today I have acquired Ruth the Moabitess. So the first qualification of the Goal is he has to be a blood relative. The second qualification is he has to be willing, because he doesn't have to. This isn't a have to position. It's a get to position.
Yeah.
And then the third qualification is he has to be able, meaning he has to have that money, the escrow account. He has to be able to do this. At the beginning of chapter 2, in 2:1, we find out that Boaz has a little bit of money. Naomi had a kinsman of her husband, a man of great wealth, of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. So there's got to be an ability to do this, not just the blood relativeness, not just the willingness, but I've got the money to back it up. I've got the resources to be able to do this. So chapter 4, verse 9, I'm going fast so Bill can get to bed. Chapter 4, verse 9. Then Boaz said to the 10 elders and to all the people, you are witnesses today that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. Moreover, I've acquired, so he's got the money. Today, I bought all that land, the land belonging to 3 people. So he had an ability to do this too. Now we saw that the closer relative, he had an ability. I want the land. He had the ability, but he didn't choose to do it. Isn't that cool?
Mm-hmm.
And then look at 313. There was another ability besides the money. 313. Again, this is when he's talking to Ruth. We'll get to this part more in detail, but I want you to see the ability. Remain this night. When the morning comes, if he will redeem you, good, let him do it. But if he does not wish to redeem you, then I will redeem you. So Boaz couldn't do it until closer relatives said he didn't want to. No matter how much money he had or how blood related he was not able to do it until he was the closest one. He said, I am a kinsman redeemer, but I'm not there is one closer than I. You guys see that?
Right, right.
So really, when we're looking at this, we're looking at Boaz as kinsman redeemer. There's all this stuff that had to happen. All the circumstances had to be just right. All the pieces had to come together in the just right way in order for this to happen in a good way for Ruth.
Yeah.
Okay. There's more to this. You probably, if you're feeling the tingles right now, it's because there's more to this.
Yes.
Yeah.
But for now, this is where we're going to leave it because Bill needs to get to bed and it's going to snow tonight and we're past 8 o'clock. But next week, we're going to finish off we're going to still be in chapter 2 because there's cool stuff in there. But do you like this, going back in the Old Testament and figuring out what the heck's going on in all these things?
Yes.
We gotta come back next week. It's a cliffhanger.
It's a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Those tingles are telling you. Yeah. The tingles are showing you that something more is there. So I didn't introduce Donna to you guys. You guys see Donna there? She was one of my students from clear way back. I haven't seen her for a really long time, but so it's super, super fun to have her. So everybody say hi to Donna. And
Hi, everybody.
She lives in Baxter, you guys.
With all the answers.
Yep. So she's back like with Linda and with
Pam,
Nancy. Yeah.
Stacy.
Yep. Pam is, I don't think they know those guys either, but yes, from the Clearway back to when the school was going. So I'm glad to have her.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Okay. Does everybody feel good?
Yeah. Really good.
Yeah.
It's
Very good.
keep
Good
studying
study.
it, keep marking. Okay, Jeffy.
Is Donna and Pam local? Twin Cities or no?
Pam,
We used to-
Donna's
we all
in
used-
Baxter.
Yep. We all used to be in Elk River.
Yeah, okay, so you can't come to church here next Thursday night.
I
For Bill.
wish. I wish I could, but I'll be on Zoom.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Pam is in,
She's
Yeah.
in Elk River.
nope, this Pam.
Oh,
Me, I'm in Austin, Texas.
Oh, wow.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, she'll be able to be here next week.
Yeah.
You can count on it.
Back to this.
Yeah.
Stay
And
away, we're
Tanya's-
getting lots of snow.
Tanya's back in
Oh.
Minnesota, but Lewis, where are you now?
Tulsa.
You're still in Tulsa.
Yeah.
Have you swung by ORU to go watch a baseball game or anything?
No, not yet. No.
My old stomping
I'm
grounds.
not really
got-
into sports.
Well, you can go see the college that
It's
I went to.
baseball.
If you
I
want
watch
to.
the Vikings. That's about the extent of that.
Oh, okay.
But
yeah.
I just did book a spot in the eclipse path though.
Oh,
So
you're
we're
gonna go
gonna
see the
do that.
clips.
Yeah. So
Fun.
hopefully Tanya's okay by then and she can come meet me and then and when we're done with that, then our place should be opening up, I'm hoping, in Minnesota. As long as there's
Back
not
up the-
too feet of snow.
Cool.
Mhm.
Just for in the news, on Saturday, it's Purim. It's the Jewish festival of Purim. So you can read the book of Esther because that's what the Jews do on Purim. They read Esther. And then I always tell you guys, if you're reading Esther and you're not laughing, you're not reading it right. You're supposed to laugh. It's funny. And every time you hear the word Haman, you go, la, 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 la,
We actually do that as one of our skits in our training for kids at heart that we do all over the world. And we do make them do all the
Yep.
different, like a clothesline skit where they're bouncing between characters and stuff. And they
Yeah.
act it out. Yeah, we do Esther.
Cool. Yep.
We saw Esther in Branson, the theater.
Yeah.
Which was amazing as a theater, but it rekindled the story of, that other way that God saved the Jews again.
Yeah.
And it was hilarious. The end part was hilarious.
Yes.
Very
good.
Yes. Okay, is everybody good?
Yes.
Good.
Well, I hope everybody stays healthy. Now we've had our surgeries.
Yeah.
Amen and amen.
Broken limbs,
What?
broken limbs. Linda.
Yeah, we've had that.
Broken. Yeah. Linda's broken limbs. Yes. So everybody stay healthy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hey, you guys. You're
Bless.
all my favorites.
Night.
You're my
Bye,
favorite.
Bye, everybody.
Night.
I.
Bye, everybody.
Good night,
Good to
everyone.
see you.
See you.
Bye, everyone. That's good.
Go to bed, Bill.
I am.
Night,
Good
John
night.
Boy. Night, Bob.
Bye, Jeff.